So what's the scene like there in the Hudson Valley?
The scene, I mean, I live in Cold Spring, New York, which is near Beacon. And it's a pretty small town. It's pretty sleepy, but
Right.
that's really nice for me.
Yeah, sure. That's all right.
But
Cool.
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I know, like, there's a lot of people in the music industry that have moved up here, performers, but also like, tour managers and like, producers and stuff like that. So it seems like there is some like musical hub kind of activity going on still.
Cool. Excellent. Nice. And so you released Fixed Memory finally, because I get the feeling that it's been in the works for a while. So
Yeah.
how does it feel to finally have it out?
Oh man, it's definitely like it feels like a weight, really. My producer and I, Pete Brownlee,
Yeah.
we're friends from, he went to a different college, but we were friends in college and he was in another band. And then like shortly after that, we started making, songs and producing songs. And since then it's been kind of in the works to like finally get a album together, really.
Right.
So it's been 3 years, on the low end of it.
Fair enough. And obviously COVID probably had something to do with it, but were there other elements that slowed you down or took time up?
Yeah, I mean, COVID definitely pushed it back a year. I
Right.
mean, I would say like the whole in the entire process, I'm glad that it took this long, because I think if it was released earlier, it wouldn't have been ready, and I wouldn't have been ready. But
Right.
it took the time that it needed. COVID was a big like, okay, are we going to release a record like, now when I can't really tour on it or do anything with it, really. But before that, it was like this whole record was not really recorded in a studio. It was just like a bunch of different apartments that I lived in and Pete
Right.
lived in, and he was in Asheville, North Carolina, and I was in New York. So it was like sending, clips of stuff back and forth, and then I'd go meet up with him. So it was puzzle pieced together really in a way that made it a lot longer than we expected it to be. But
So how did the two of you work together? What kind of roles do you take on making this record?
I mean, I'm primarily the songwriter.
Yeah.
I usually He is a bass player and piano player, so we've known each other for so long, and we understand kind of what Glen Echo is. It's like I write these songs, but it has its own kind of like, persona that we both of us can easily tell whether it's, going to fit within Glen Echo, or, we
Right.
need to direct it in a certain way. But I'll usually bring like a song or make like a little demo, and then it's usually just us two, trying to play all the instruments. And
Yep.
especially at least on this one, we're in the midst of a second album, and we're now gonna try and get some more people involved.
Uh-huh. You do have a couple other people involved, so there's
Yeah. This
some
was that was a lot of those were like New York friends that I you know they're just amazing musicians that I was like, you have to be on it. Like, I can't, you're better at whatever you do than I could do, so.
right. And are you able to do gigs now? Are you playing out live? Or because I know your tour got kind of canceled in the middle of last year, I think it was.
Yeah. I've had a huge tour, or not, I mean, huge for me, I guess, with this fantastic artist, Eliza Edens, and we were going to do, like, share a bass and drummer. And so
Right.
it would be 4 people, but we'd have 2, full band sets.
Yep.
That got canceled. Then this past June and July, I played a couple gigs, and I recently just played one in LA when I was for the album release.
Right.
Pete lives out there now, and so I visited him. But I don't have anything. It's kind of still up in the air now for the rest of the year, just with playing indoors now that it's colder,
Right.
and
Yes.
I don't know how comfortable I feel about that, but
Fair enough.
definitely
Yeah,
next year.
Got to be careful.
I know it's one of those things where I'm like, I've seen people book some stuff and like do stuff, and more power to them. But like, I definitely err on the side of caution, at least for the rest of this year.
So tell me about your songwriting process. This is it an EP or an LP? Because it's about 28 minutes long, but there's like 12 tracks, right?
Yeah. I wish it was a little bit longer, because then I would feel comfortable saying it's an LP.
Right.
I'm still going to call it an LP because it feels like a milestone.
Right. Fair enough. Especially at this point after 3 years. Yeah.
Exactly. It was at 3 years in, we were like, just release it, just whatever we have, just put it together.
Right.
But so yeah, a lot of this this one especially was written a couple of years ago, because it's taken so long. And at that point I was very much in transition from some post-college moves, and then just like kind of figuring out where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. And I feel like the title of the project, Fixed Memory, and each of the individual songs kind of relate into this way of like, when these songs were written, it's such a specific time of my life, and I can remember when each of these were written, but now that they've been so long and I've played them so many times, it's kind of has its own memory as in my mind of I go through stages of how I feel about these songs, but trying to like solidify like this was this period,
Right.
So the first two are like, the production styles are like pretty similar, like almost field recording sounding.
Right.
And they were recorded outside. And they kind of like bookend the album of like this kind of palindrome, like you start somewhere and then you like go off and then you come back to basically where you started. But
because the album or the EP, whichever, ends with "How Much Blood," which seems like a little more political than the rest of the album.
Ain't no reason why I should die.
Yeah. So interestingly, both the Rising Wide-Eyed and How Much Blood were written like on the same day. But
right.
Kind of this, polar, or maybe not polar opposite, but two sides of one coin of kind of a feeling of just being alive and like feeling that wonderment. Like Rising Wide-Eyed is kind of like waking up and being like, oh my gosh, it's amazing, I get to wake up every day. And
yes, and you hear this like bird song and stuff in it. And,
you're waking up to the album, in that way. And then How Much Blood is kind of like, it's so amazing that we're alive, but like, why, there's also a lot of suffering that's happening, and kind of like the flip side of that, of like, it's great that we're alive, but if we're not enjoying it, or we're having, suffering, then it's kind of like, I don't know.
So was there something, an event or something that inspired you to write that song?
There was. Yeah, it was like I said, it was written so long ago. It was basically when in the news, it was all about like Syria and Assad, like gassing a lot of his women and children of his population. And I woke up to that, and I had already been thinking about like animals kind of like going to bed and not knowing whether they're going to wake up. Like if you're a little like, muskrat or something, like
right.
You never, you're like, oh, there's a tiger at night that is going to get me or something.
Yep.
But like thinking about that also with people in that way of just like, what a horrific event. I mean, just not thinking that your own leader could do something like that, and just like a horrible genocide in that way. Oh my gosh.
Fair enough. Now, sonically, I noticed that you and your co-producer Peter mix kind of synths with like mandolins and things. So it's kind of these electronic things with this very kind of organic sounds. Is that, yeah. Tell me about why and how you do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think most of my songwriting and upbringing came from like folk tradition stuff, writing on acoustic guitar and stuff like that. I play electric, but really I really started on acoustic and that kind of vibe. But Bjork is my favorite artist, and
Bjork,
she is like the
you don't really think of her as a folkie.
Yeah, her influence doesn't come that quite through in the music yet, maybe. I don't know. But she is like the master of like melding organic and kind of like, industrial mechanical sounds into this thing that sounds so like organic and natural, but it might be made of like, synths or something like that. So we really wanted to like, we wanted all these electronic kind of elements. We don't make electronic music, but I feel like there's a place for it really in a lot of music. And it's some of those sounds are just like, you can't produce them with acoustic instruments, and they just have a certain impact. And so we wanted to incorporate that, but we, with my writing style and what Glen Echo kind of is, it had to keep that natural, like outdoor, acoustic kind of feel to it.
So when you say Glen Echo is, you obviously have something in your mind that is specifically that.
Yeah. I mean, we both Peter and I make a lot of different music. And so, and also just for my own kind of mindset too, like, they're very personal songs, but there's something to me about Glen Echo, me as Matt isn't like Glen Echo is my life. That's not all of me, in that way. And so to like put it as a certain persona, it's like, it also gives me that idea of like what serves Glen Echo. Like, oh, should I put this, sometimes I'm like, should I put that synth in there? And I'm like, but is that me just wanting to do that? Or is that like serving the actual like song,
Right. Now, speaking of other things, did you release a covers album earlier this year as well?
Yeah, I did. That was my like COVID project, basically.
Oh, that's good.
I know. I was working at a restaurant, and I got furloughed for, like most people. And it was really like, I need to do something to like, I can't like just sit around and watch the news all day. So I made up this little like menu of things that people could pay me for, almost like a Patreon type thing or something.
Right.
And one of them was like, $10 to do a cover of a song. And so I did about, I forget how many, it was probably like 30 or something, and compiled it this year when I finished the last one in February, and released it all as one album.
Yeah. So when you approach a cover, do you try to recreate it? Do you try to put your own spin on it? How do you? It
depends on the song. I think like a lot of the time I try to recreate a lot, the skeletal, version of it. But I think because I've been playing music for a long time, even me trying to replicate something, my own voice comes out in that way.
Yep.
And so some of those songs are like verbatim, like the chords are the same, the melody's the same. There's no like craziness, but it just sounds not like the original. Like it sounds like me in the basement doing it or something.
That's probably a good thing, right?
Yeah, it has its own character in that way.
Otherwise, I could just listen to the record.
Yeah.
Cool. So are you thinking about what you're going to do next?
Yeah, I mean, I I was just in LA for the album release, and I played a show, but then Pete and I started recording for LP2.
Right.
And I mean, during the pandemic, it was, strangely productive, even though it didn't really feel like it. Like,
Yep.
I feel when I've talked to a lot of other musicians and artists, it's always like, oh, I didn't do anything during, it was such a great time, but it was so stressful. Like, I feel guilty for not like making more stuff. But then like I look at what I did made and I was like, oh, that was actually a lot. That was more than I expected.
Yeah.
So we're like trying to roll pretty hard on that and really trying to, I would love to get that out by next year.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens.
Definitely not a 3-year thing. Yeah. If it's less than 3 years, it's a success.
Well, there you go. You should be able to hit that one on the head.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for spending time talking to me. I don't want to keep writing the next record. So
no. Well, thanks so much for meeting Marty, and
my pleasure.
Yep. Good
Thank you
luck
very much.
on Tuesday.
All right. See ya. Bye-bye.